of my favorite things that we do in ProductCraft on the site is we bring in several product leaders to take different positions on hot topics. Therefore, the debate club. So we call it the ProductCraft Debate Club. And so what we have tonight is the ProductCraft Debate Club live. And since Hila is the editor-in-chief of ProductCraft, she is going to be moderating this panel, and it should be great. So I'm going to turn the time over to Hila to introduce the panel and go from there.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everyone. Super excited that you're here. Who here has been on ProductCraft? Yeah, good. That's awesome. I hope you all. Yes. Okay, cool. So I'm super excited that you guys are here. Our panelists were a little bit concerned, last session, who's going to be there. So I hope you all have beers, are settled in, and I think you're going to love what you see today, which means you're definitely going to come back next year. So as Brian said, I'm the editor of ProductCraft. This morning he said, he loves his job. I love my job. I get to curate a site that's all for product managers. Some of the most passionate people on this planet. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. So before we start, I'm going to have the debaters introduce themselves. Brigitte, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brigitte Eder. I'm a senior product manager at Outreach. We're a sales engagement platform based in Seattle, Washington. We're about 260 employees now, just a really nice, fun, small team on the product side of about 3 product managers. Before Outreach, I've been there for now about a year and 4 months. Before that, I was at Microsoft for a number of years, working on kind of a multitude of different projects, but spending a lot of my time on Windows and Windows user experience. So I decided to kind of jump ship on the corporate life and go into the wonderful world of startups, and it's been amazing ever since.
All right, I'm Cliff Gilley. I'm currently a technical product manager at K2 Source Code. We're a business process automation platform for enterprise customers. That's my day job. My night job, my Batman job, is a blogger for my blog, The Clever PM, but I also have written blog posts for Pendo, for User Voice, for a bunch of different companies in the industry. I've been doing this gig for about 15 years in product management. And my particular flavor is agile transformations. In the past 3 companies that I've worked at, we've gone from long delayed release cycles down to strict 2-week cadences. So.
Cool. I'm Deb Woods. I'm the Vice President of Product Management over at Relias. We have about 700 employees, and our whole mantra is we work in the healthcare space. It's around helping our clients to know more so they can get better. I went to Relias because I want to change the way healthcare is delivered in this country. We do that through analytics, helping health systems understand what's going right, what's going wrong, who's doing it well, who's not, identifying gaps that they have, and then helping train their staffs. So your mom, my mom, our kids all get better health care when we go to the health system. That's what we do.
Yay. All right. I'm Steve Johnson with Under 10, which is how many things we should be focused on. Not 50, not 150. I've been training product managers for over 20 years, and the last 5 I've been doing a lot of coaching and implementation assistance of trying to get companies to be more oriented around the strategic role of product management rather than the janitorial role that many of you serve. Reading aloud from Jira, for instance, being the critical part of our day. I've been writing and blogging since 1999, which is a long time. And now I'm in competition with Cliff for the #1 position in product management on Quora. So please go to Quora, find something I wrote, and upvote the shit out of it. Because
and then read what I wrote and upvote the shit out of that.
No. So that's me.
So as you can see, we're going to have a lively debate. And I want to start with the question that we actually pulled on this week, and we're going to publish the debate tomorrow. But the question that's been up on ProductCraft this week is, what's a better place for a new product management to start? Is it a startup or is it a big corporation? And I want to start with Brigitte, because Brigitte was formerly at Microsoft. There was some snark about Microsoft at our kickoff call here. which I won't reveal more about. But Bridget, what do you think? What's a better place for a new PM? Is it a startup or a big corporation?
I think the most important thing that I've realized for starting as a new PM is having somebody at your company, hopefully more than one person, ideally a team of people who have the time and ability to actually mentor you and help you within the role. I think one of the best things about being at Microsoft was I had this team of amazing PMs that I was surrounded by, that I could learn from, that I could, really experience on the job. Product is, to me, it just is so different depending on your customers, your product, the company, the environment that you're in, the industry. And to be a brand new PM and as amazing of blogs as you guys write, to try to read those blogs and apply them into your space without anybody else around you helping you would be incredibly difficult. So I think there's advantages to a big company. Obviously, the processes are in place. You just get to learn them versus having to create something totally from scratch. And then obviously, as you go on, you can take what you've learned and apply them in a multitude of environments. But the best thing I would say is just don't go to a company where you're the only PM, or even a place where the only other PM is so strapped for time, and that's the only reason they hired you, and they'd have no time to talk to you or mentor you. I think you just need a team of people that you can learn from within your own environment. I think that's so important.
Steve?
Darn, I was going to find a way to say that's wrong.
You're the contrarian.
I know.
Well, I'll take that.
Oh, good.
Why not? If you can't, I will. So I struggle with this because while it's great to have a structured product process and team behind you, it's also really freeing to not have that, to be able to come in and create the product environment that you want based on your exposure to the product and to the market. So at a company like Microsoft, there's a way it's done. And if you learn that, you will do amazingly well at Microsoft. And then the minute you move to somewhere else, you're going to struggle because the way they do it isn't the way Microsoft does it. I'm actually dealing with this right now at K2 because a lot of our, I'd say probably 60% of our organization has been at the company for more than 12 years. So we have a ton of people who are just in the way that they think and the way that they do things. And I come in and trying to change things, and it can be a struggle. So it kind of depends on your personality. If you're someone that wants to come in, hit the ground running, start making things happen, you're going to pick a startup.
Yeah, but I would have to jump in here, and I agree with your comment on this because you need to have coaches and mentors to help you there. And I think if you're not careful and you go in a startup and you don't have the background, product managers can cost a company a lot of money. Okay. I mean, and part of our role is to drive revenue, to keep customers sat, and make sure you've got the right margin. And if you're in unfamiliar territory and you don't understand the basics, you can be a very expensive liability for a company. So you've got to have great mentors, you have a good coaching network, and I think it's hard to find that in a small startup if you don't have that network. It's not to say you can't, but it's just harder. And I think having a larger company that has some of that infrastructure that can teach you is great. And I think a great product manager doesn't get kind of stifled or stuck in a process. When they move, part of what we do is we listen and talk to everybody in the organization, and you talk to your customers, and you understand what the market need is. So you have to be flexible and adaptable, and that means adapting your process as well. So.
Just get in and learn, and then get out before you
before you become too stuck.
Yeah.
I worked for a billion-dollar software company, which was my first exposure to product management, and I was so frustrated because they had so much freaking process, you couldn't get anything done. It took a year to get somebody to approve something. So I went to a startup, and it was wonderful for a week. They had no process, and anybody could do anything. And I came across a meeting one day where the developers were deciding to rename the product. And they were already in the code, and I'm like, hang on, we need some rules here. And they're like, hell no, we're a startup, there are no rules. And happily, I agree with you, I had enough exposure, I think, to the structure that I was able to say, well, I understand what the job is. And if I were in a startup first, there's a huge pull for you to do the work of all the other departments. So if you don't know what your job is, then you end up doing development's work, or, hey, I need you to go on a sales call. Or can you do this demo for me? And supporting sales is not product management. Supporting marketing isn't product management either. And yet if you're not crisp on that, then you'll find yourself doing the work of others. And I do remember real quick, I got a call from a sales guy who said, I need you to do a demo. And my answer was, I don't know how to do a demo yet. It's my first week. I don't have a PC. And I said, I don't do demos. And he went, oh, great, and never called me again. And it was wonderful. So big companies give you structure, but perhaps too much structure. Startups give you no structure, so you need to be really crisp on what it is you're bringing to the party, and that is ultimately how do we grow the product.
One more. Since it's kind of 3-on-1, I think I need to say one more. I think that 10 years ago,
You're completely wrong.
The only place that you could learn product was under a mentor. That is not the case nowadays. So I teach at General Assembly in Seattle. We have a 10-week evening course on product management. We can learn the fundamentals without having to be a mentor, or without having to be mentored in an organization. There are mentors out there that you can call on, that you can ask about, that you can insert yourself in. So I'm going to say startups for the right person can be the right choice.
Cool. Since we're talking about getting into product management, I know, Cliff, you do not want to get into this, but in terms of background, and this has come up over the last couple of days a lot, and this is a question that comes up a lot on ProductCraft, and how do you feel about, since your title says technical product manager, how do you feel about how much of a technical background product managers need to have?
Zero.
How does that bode for your title? Yeah.
I actually do not like the title. I do not like the title of technical product manager. I think you're either a product manager or you're not. If the majority of the roles that wind up being called technical product manager are spec writers. That's all they are. They're order takers, spec writers who listen to what someone else wants. They write up the requirements, they drop them into TFS, and it goes on to the labs, the developers. Some of the best product managers that I have worked with have not been technical almost at all. That doesn't mean that they don't understand technical topics. I think that's the tweak, right? It's not about being able to write code, but it's about being conversant in the technology with your development teams. And if you're not highly technical, if you don't know anything about database design, you want to build some trust and respect with your developers, go in and talk to them. Say, hey, I don't know anything about databases. Can you describe why you chose to do it this way? Work with your architect teams. Like, it's an opportunity for you to learn more, but not dictate the solution, which is what a lot of really technical product managers wind up doing. We create the solution in our heads before we've even articulated the problem to the developers.
And I find that a lot of the product managers who are the ones that were advocating coding are in fact not product managers. They are development managers. Mm-hmm. They're assigning tasks, they're writing detailed stories, they're designing solutions. And yesterday something came up that I saw a really crisp bifurcation, and that is I talk about product management loving the problem, and for development to love the solution. And to me, that's the clear line. If you're talking about what the solution is, welcome to development.
You're supposed to disagree, you know?
Oh, shoot.
No, I'm kidding.
Cliff, you're so wrong.
Every once in a while, we find some common ground.
See, I would disagree on this because I think you need a mix. And because sometimes when you're out there in front of the clients and you're working through, because you made a comment a while ago that you don't think product management supports sales. I believe product management supports whatever. I mean, you drive the vision, the strategy, but a good product manager needs to be able to stand there with a client, with a prospect, explain what's going on and why this is important. You know, I have product managers that are clinicians because we deliver content to the market. I have product managers that are doctors, that are nurses, that are counselors, and they need to be able to explain what this product does and what the solution does. I have analytics teams, and they need to be able to understand that. They're not providing the solution, but they need to be able to talk coherently with prospects and with clients around how the product's used. And you can teach that, but you still have to have a little bit of the acumen around what that product's delivering. And so I think it's a challenge if you don't have some of the skills.
I would actually add on to that. I think what's more important than a technical background is actually a people background, right? Because it's more that you're trying to understand people and build that empathy. And I mean, I have a cognitive science degree that's heavily rooted in psychology, and I find that to be so much more useful than having spent 10 years coding, because I don't code, right? That's not my job, and that's not what my job will ever be. And I may be on the leaning side of more of a UX-focused product manager versus a technical product manager, if you want to say that. But you know, most good companies, you're going to be full stack anywhere. And again, yeah, talk to your developers more than go try to code. You're going to learn a lot more from your engineering team about the technical acumen that you need to build up. And obviously you have to have a passion for technology, right? You have to have a passion for that. But I'm so much happier that I have a psychology background than having a computer science or engineering degree.
And if you look at where this came from, this idea that product managers must be technical came from companies like Google and Facebook and Apple. But it wasn't because they wanted technical people, it's because they were getting too many qualified candidates, so they were picking people with a broader set of skills. And somehow this turned into some mythical, you must be able to write code to be a good product manager. And I would say what you described, Deb, wasn't actually technical skills. It's knowing the market. It's understanding the product and the people. It's not, your nurses and doctors don't write code. And that's,
No, they
that's
don't,
what we
yeah.
usually, that's what we hear in the market when someone wants a technical product manager.
Yeah. So, I mean, none of my product managers would write code, and I wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't go there. But you need to understand sometimes the technology of what's being there to be able to explain through it. And, you know, I think you just need to have a balance.
I tell my students in my GA class that they need to be Wikipedia smart about technology, if nothing else. Like, you need to go find out the technology stack of your company, go to Wikipedia, read the first paragraph, understand it, and you're probably good for most things. And if you need more information, go to the experts. Go to the people that are writing the code.
That reminds me, I did a survey a while back, and I asked people, you know, are you technical? And I got a call from a friend, and she said, well, what do you mean by technical? And she's like, you know, I'm not really that technical. I've written some PHP, and I can read raw HTML. And I went, okay, I'm going to call that technical. I mean more technical than a sales rep. And she's like, oh, yeah, hell, everybody's more technical than a sales rep.
Hey, don't bash on my people as my customers.
Yeah.
Since we're talking a lot about the interface between product and other places in the company, sales, marketing, research sometimes, analytics, how do you guys feel about organizational structure in terms of product? And how should product be positioned relative to other departments?
Up to product, hands down. Yeah, I think you need an executive in product at the table. I mean, otherwise it's not important to the company if you don't have a head of product or a CPO or somebody else like that alongside engineering and sales and marketing. I mean, I know it's changing, and I know there's a lot of companies out there that aren't like that, but in any situation where you're reporting up to marketing or something else, you're going to defer to that. And I don't know, for me personally, I want to see my career path at my company too, or in companies like it. I want to see a head of product that I can go, okay, that's the job I want. That's where I want to go. I don't want to see, okay, if I want to succeed, I have to go to marketing or I have to go to engineering, and there's no path for me in product. I want to see that leadership there, and I want that representation. Like, if it's not my voice there, I want a voice that's representing me as a product person.
Totally agree. I mean, I'm also a lawyer, and we have this concept in legal ethics called conflict of interest. And anytime you're reporting to someone who's not an independent head of product, you have an inherent conflict of interest. If you're reporting up to marketing and marketing has an ask that conflicts with what the development team needs or what the customer wants, you're going to defer to your boss. They sign your checks. They decide what your performance is. And you don't rock that boat. You might push a little bit, but eventually they will win. Same thing with technical, reporting up through development. I've worked in one company where product management reported up through engineering, and I will never, ever, ever do it again. Because it literally got to the point where they were making technical decisions that were driving the product strategy, not product strategy driving technical decisions. And it's a scary place. So I think as we're seeing more people who've been doing this for 15, 20 years, there's more opportunity for actual senior leadership that gets it.
Now, what do you guys think about product and like a combined product UX role? Because I feel like I've seen that work pretty well, where you have someone that leads up, the UX or design team and the product team under one, which I think can work pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question is whether UX is defining problems or defining solutions.
True.
And in most UX, they are defining the problem as much as they're defining the solution. So I would agree with that. Let me speak to marketing, since all of you said no. I majored in marketing and minored in computer science, which made me unemployable. And what I learned in college as marketing is what we now call product.
Interesting.
Marketing was product, price, positioning, placement, and some other words that start with P. Marketing was strategy. And if you read some of the old books, like as a consultant, I'm required by law to quote Peter Drucker. I believe Peter Drucker is the one who said that every organization has two functions, innovation and marketing. And by marketing, he did not mean T-shirts. He did not mean lead gen. He did not mean promotional programs. He meant understanding the market well enough that we could build products that solve their problems. So if your company defines marketing that way, then I would say, yes, product and marketing are the same thing. If instead marketing is lead gen, then I'd argue that maybe they ought to be reporting to sales.
So what about in the cases where marketing is both product marketing and lead gen, or both product marketing and lead gen and content marketing?
But then I would ask, how are they defining product marketing? Because in a lot of companies I'm seeing now, they actually define product marketing as more of that lead gen, doing the collateral, doing the
Positioning,
webinars,
collateral.
position, doing that. Because I agree with you, when I think of product management, I think very much, as I described, my job is to drive sales at the right margin with the NPS scores. It's very much around a business point of view of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
You know.
So
And not to
that's
say
the
you
real
can't get
question.
value right from that. I mean, I think I'm so grateful our entire product team knows our value drivers that marketing uses through and through. And I mean, we try to, every single release we're pushing is related to a value driver just as much related to an OKR.
So do you create those value drivers or does marketing?
I'd like to say it's a partnership. It's heavier in marketing. I mean, it's obviously with product contribution, but they are coming from marketing more so than from product.
Okay, so I live in a world that product management actually delivers those value props and what we're bringing to the market. So it's got a little twist of that marketing
Right.
in it, and our product marketing is more of that lead gen webinar. That
Got it.
And should product marketing be under product or should it be under marketing?
That's, I think,
depends
the
on how
most
you
interesting
define it.
question.
That's why I was like, how do you define
Yeah.
product marketing?
Well, there's one trick. To be in product marketing, you have to know the product. It's not just, well, I kind of screwed up in Marcom, so let me move into product marketing. My daughter was dating a guy who was a product marketing guy for something, not a consumer product, but a product that you could install on your computer. And she was a user of this product. And she said, well, he asked her a question about it. And she said, well, you know, you just click this thing on the right-hand side. And he's like, oh, no, I don't use the product. I've never used the product. And she broke it off. You know, well done. You know, how can you do your job if you don't know the product you're marketing? Good for her. Good girl.
I think from an organization standpoint, it's all about alignment and aligning the right people to the right goals and the right roles.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really care what you call it, as long as you're doing it right. And you're doing it at the right time with the right people in the right structure that allows everybody to succeed. And that's why I don't like the idea of reporting through marketing or through engineering or anybody else, because all of those groups have their own little secret agendas that they're going to push you toward, whether you want it or not. But if you have that independent chief product officer, VP of product, director of product, whatever you want to call it, that role gets to do what they want. And they should be, hopefully, customer-focused, user-centered, all those buzzwords that we love, and they can make things happen for you. If you're working through, guarantee, if you're working through engineering, it is insanely difficult to get out of those four walls, because they aren't the kinds of people that travel a lot.
And who would read to them from Jira?
Exactly.
So I had a conversation with our product team last week. We were brainstorming questions for the debate, not for this debate, for ProductCraft. And one of the things that they said is vision versus version, right? And this is related to what you're talking about.
Definitely.
And whether PMs should be more vision-driven or more version-driven. And I know you're all going to say, oh, it's a balance, you know, but like,
it's
is
vision.
anyone willing
it's
to
not.
take a
Like
stance here?
I like
It's good,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Full credit to the Pendo amazing product team.
Okay,
I
so
think
I
it
have to
has-
source you when I blog about that
You have
tomorrow?
to source them, yes. You can only blog about it for ProductCraft, so
Oh,
yeah.
all right. Okay, I'll work on that.
I think it has to be vision.
Yeah.
You do not drive a car looking in the rear view mirror. You have to look forward. You've got to know where your market's going. Yes, you have to hang on and listen to the customers and where they're at, but you've got to take that in a mode of where you need to take your product. And I think sometimes we get so hung up in, well, gosh, I've got these 4 bugs or these 4 requests from these 4 clients. I've got to do those. And you're like, what are they really asking for and why? And is that going to solve a problem coming down the road? And it's a balance, but it's more of that vision. It has to be.
And you know, your driving a car analogy is really good too, because if you're looking at versions, you're looking 1 turn ahead. Somebody needs to know where we're going,
Yeah.
not just drive up to whatever and turn right. We need to look further than that. Well done. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I see though is I almost feel like in a lot of the startups I've seen, people are almost too vision driven. They're always chasing the next thing and not actually even thinking about what they've built, right? I mean, that's been a topic of so many of the conversations of the last 2 days have been watch your data, right? Don't just release something and run away from it. And so I don't think that you can say it's full vision, because if you just release something and run away from it, you have no idea if it actually solved the problem you wanted, if it actually caused any sort of delight, if it actually brought any, delightful moments to people. And I think, if you think about it, I mean, when we look at, us growing as a startup and we're trying to grow quickly, a huge chunk of our revenue still comes from retention, right? If we're just churning customers left and right, then we're just spending a bunch of effort on sales going to get new customers and not actually retaining any of them. So I think that, yes, you need to be vision-minded. I think it's easy because PMs love being vision-minded, right? We love thinking about the next thing. I think it's actually more difficult to look back at what you've built with humility and think that maybe it wasn't the right thing. Maybe I need to scrap it completely. Maybe I need to make a huge revision. But I think we sometimes tend to get a little bit, we're dreamers, right, and tend to be a little bit egotistical about the things we build, right? You're supposed to not fall in love with the solution, right? And I think the only way to do that is to look at the solution you built and say, was this the right thing?
And I would say, I totally agree with that. I look at when I think of vision, it's not just out there. It's, you've got pilots, you're doing beta, you've got lighthouse customers that are talking to you. It's like, is this resonating? Is it delivering value?
That feels like version to me.
Well,
in my terminology, but.
Well, for me, it's still falling in love with the problem. And so whether it's out there or right here, it's, have we solved the problem? We thought we did, and then our users got in, they varped all over it, and then you're like, okay, well, before I think about 3 turns from now, maybe I ought to deal with this particular turn. But I hear your point.
But man, I'm struggling with this one. I still think it's all about vision, because vision doesn't just mean thinking 5 years out.
Yeah.
Vision, you can have a vision for tomorrow. You can have a vision for an hour from now. You can have vision at different levels, and you should strive to achieve that vision as much as possible. We had a presentation earlier today where someone, I can't remember who it was talking about how she would, when she was going to engineering, she would come up with her idea that she wanted, but then when she pitched, it's you right there. When she pitched it to engineering, she would couch it, and she'd be like, oh, well, I really want this, but I'm willing to settle for this because I know that's hard. Without talking to the engineers, without vetting that idea, I'm just as bad about it, so I guarantee you. Heather Stables, thank you very much. It's something I'm working on myself. But that's the problem. That's the version problem, is I'm not thinking about what I want. I'm thinking about what I can get. And we should always push for what we want, and if it's not possible, then we make concessions, and we figure out by stack ranking every single piece of that puzzle, what are we willing to give up? And we should not give up anything that pushes us toward that vision, but we might make a cut on UX here, and we might make a cut on the tuning and the data reporting here and there. But giving that delightful experience will never happen if you're constantly looking at the version rather than the vision.
well said.
So I think there's general agreement that vision is what should be driving it, but increasingly I'm hearing more and more people saying that Agile has broken product management a little bit because it's making people more and more focused on version instead of vision. And Cliff, maybe you can talk us through this. This happened on our call, but you said it really beautifully. What is the difference between big A Agile and little A Agile?
All right, I can definitely do that because I love that. That's my baby. So in my mind, big A Agile is the methodologies, the prescriptions, the proscriptions, the scrums, the Kanbans, the whatever you want to call it. The you must have a daily stand-up every single day for 15 minutes and everyone answers these 3 questions. You must do a retrospective and jot down ideas and put them on your backlog. All of those prescriptions are uppercase Agile. Lowercase Agile is more important. It's the cultural value of being Agile, the cultural value of accepting that we don't know everything. And more importantly, it's not just not knowing, it's not just accepting that as we find out more, we are likely to change our mind. And as we make those changes, we need to communicate them, we need to understand them, but that's the critical failure where Agile's breaking product management is that there isn't the cultural value of, I'm 90% sure this is right, so let's do something small and test it out and validate it. And if it's wrong, I've only invested 1 sprint, 2 weeks of dev time, versus, we're doing iterative waterfall, where we decide we're going to release this thing and it's going to take us 6 sprints to do, but we're not checking and inspecting at every point, right? Agile is not new at all. If you look at the history, like the Deming Way, Toyota Production Systems, lean manufacturing, all of these things exist and tell us how to do it right and how to be agile. The whole plan, do, check, act thing, that is not new by any stretch of the means. But the important part is the check and act. It's not the plan and do. So if we truly are lowercase agile, 1, we don't have to have a daily stand-up for 15 minutes where everyone asks 3 questions. But 2, we can actually actively engage with our customers, with our developers, with our internal salespeople on a regular basis to make sure we're all doing the right thing at the right time. And if we're not, stop. Do something else.
I kind of disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say I think you need to get bogged down with process, but I do think you do need it, right? And
yes.
and maybe I think the most important thing, for the teams I've worked with is that people understand why the process is in place and that you actually agree on the goals. And so I think that's where the culture comes in. But like I need that 15-minute stand-up because that is, yes, I sit next to my engineers, but I'm also at my desk a total of 30 seconds a day, if I'm lucky, right? And that's when I'm scarfing down my lunch, and it's really healthy, I'm sure. But that's the time I have to know if there's blockers, to know, what things are moving, to know if I need to do anything. People can have that forced communication, and especially engineering, it's easy to get caught up in what they're doing and one person at a time, and I think it is helpful, but what I found works so well is having working agreements that are set up by the tribes. We operate on the tribes model, similar to Spotify, if people know what that's like. So with PM, UX, engineering, all the engineers, we're coming together and deciding together if we're going to do Kanban, if we're going to do thin story slicing, if we're going to, what has to be in a card for it to be done. And sometimes it's annoying, right? I mean, we relaxed a little bit. We tried to do like the if, given, then, when acceptance criteria, and I nearly cried every single time I had to write a card. But we've relaxed it a little bit. But I mean, we have so many people involved, and I think having the process takes the PM out of the bottleneck, right? Because if more people know what has to go into a card so that anybody can accept it, and it's not just PM accepting it, then it frees me up to do a lot more because we've written some things down and agreed to them as a group. But you do have to agree to it as a group, and you need the culture to be there. But without the process, my life would be on fire. So I need it.
Don't read my statement to say you don't need process. You absolutely need process. You need repeatable processes. If you don't have some process that going in what the way you're going to work in and what you expect the outcome to be, you are not going to be effective because you'll constantly be reinventing the wheel. What I like to say is something like Scrum it's your training wheels, right? You can go to scrum.org and you can read the book and you can do all of those things, but you're not having the daily stand-up because scrum.org tells you to have a daily stand-up.
Sure.
You're having the daily stand-up because there's value in having that meeting. And if there weren't value, you probably wouldn't want to have it because that's 15 minutes, you can go do something else. It reminds me of the concept, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but it's called a cargo cult. And the idea is, way back in the late 19th, early 20th century, as the United States and England were expanding into the Pacific, we had to build airports where we'd land planes and we'd unload and we'd stage off and take off. Some of the indigenous people who had a culture that was driven by material possessions, the person that had the most things and who was owed the most by other people was the big man in the tribe. They saw these planes coming and landing and dropping off all this wealth, all this stuff, and they wanted it. So they decided to build their own airports. And they would, with whatever materials they had, they would build a what looked like a fully functioning airport with, flagpoles and huts, air traffic control, in the belief that merely by building that airport, these airplanes would come and land and give them what they wanted. And there's a lot of companies out there that do that with Agile. If I just do Scrum, everything will be awesome. And that is absolutely not true. If you just blindly go in and have a daily stand-up to have a daily stand-up, it's dumb. One, it's a waste of time. Two, you're not getting any value out of it. And three, people probably don't really understand what the point of it is. If you're doing retrospectives, well, there we go. If you're doing retrospectives, but you're not actually following up on it, if you don't understand the value of what you're trying to do and what the outcome that you expect from that is, you might as well just be doing waterfall because you're not gaining any of the actual benefits of the process, of the tools, of that constant plan, do, check, act model.
In defense of the Agile people, and the truth is I agree with everything you said, a bunch of nerds got together in 2001, and because they were nerds, they couldn't ski, so they went to a bar, and they were talking about which character on Battlestar was hottest, and then decided to write the Agile Manifesto. But these guys had decades of experience of what works. And so a lot of the techniques, and by the way, this was, these were techniques that were created in the 90s. Actually, in retrospect, I realized that I invented Scrum, but I didn't write a book. But these were commonly used practices, but they've codified them. And I think you're right. I think a lot of times, sorry, I was going to make a Bible analogy, and I don't really know my room well enough. But anyway, now I've derailed myself. I think a lot of times people follow the words without following the faith.
Yeah. Right.
That was as close as I could come. Okay. And so these, Scrum and XP and Kanban, these were principles that were proven by experienced people who had a history of producing good work. But you can't just build the airport and hope the airplane brings you cargo. I totally agree with that.
I think what we're basically saying is it's a guideline. And you pick and choose what works for your culture and your organization. You need some structure, but it needs to fit what your company's doing.
Well, and if you actually read the Agile Manifesto, which
we're
many
not doing
people
that.
haven't actually done, right? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. While we find value in the things on the left, or things on the right, we value the things on the left more. It doesn't mean that we don't find value in all of those 8 things. So when we just blindly follow Scrum because someone comes in and gives us a one-day training for us all to be CSPOs, we're not actually getting any of that benefit. So if we're not changing the process, if we aren't deciding, hey, you know what, I've got a development team in South Africa that's 10 hours ahead of me, so I can't actually do sprint reviews every Friday. We change that up, and now they do videos after they complete a story, they record it, and they say, hey, it's here, when you get a chance, look at it. So by necessity, we have to not do Scrum. We have to be Agile.
Yeah, you have to decide what's right, and then you do need to play like the tiniest bit of process cop in the beginning, because then otherwise people won't switch. And luckily, my wonderful engineering manager plays process cop a lot better than I do. So find somebody else to do that job, because it's not most fun, but it's essential, I think.
Cool.
All right, I got a couple more questions, but I'm actually conscientious of the time, and I want to see if there's anyone in the audience that has a question. I think we have a mic going around. Mike Peach with the mic. If there's any questions.
Give us something we can argue about.
Yeah. I think you can project also. I'll repeat it back.
So you talked about the whole process thing and getting away from it and having it whatever. But I might feel a certain way, right? Like about flexibility and who you're going to be with the actual ceremony. But anyway, so maybe I agree, and I believe these ceremonies are valuable, et cetera, but if my team doesn't follow them or doesn't value them, for example, we have a retro, and we go through all this stuff, and then everybody leaves, and they go about their business, and 2 weeks later, we're having another retro, and nothing's changed. So as a product manager, I'm not sure how I can change that without feeling like I'm militant about process, but at the end of the day, I would like for things to be better. How do you do that?
Make the process your product. You're a product manager. Sell the value. Don't sell the process itself. Because the reason why we do retros is so that we can improve. Do you want to improve as a team? If the answer is no, fine, we won't do retros. Honestly, maybe get a new team at that point. But I mean, if they don't understand, often what we do is we go, okay, we're going to do retros. And then we say, what a retro is we go in and we talk about what we did last sprint. And then we make some action items, and then we'll follow up on those maybe sometime if we get around to it. That's not selling the value. That's not saying we're going to be we're going to do retrospectives so that we can be a better team, so that we can work better together, so that we can have better processes, so we can have better outcomes across the board. Yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, and it's not easy. Agile transformation is terribly difficult for so many reasons. The biggest one being that Scrum and Agile were created by a bunch of software developers who weren't paying any attention to anything outside of development. So if you do Scrum, that's great for your dev team, but can your sales and marketing teams deal with 2-week iterations? Yeah. Can your sales and marketing team deal with uncertainty? They probably can't. So we need to train and help them understand why we're doing it and what's in it for them. Hey, sales and marketing, yeah, we're doing things every 2 weeks, but you know what? We're also going to have a build that you can install, that you can set up, that you can access every 2 weeks. So you can decide when you're going to release it based on your experience of going in and seeing what we've actually done.
Right behind you. Got another question.
So we had the whole debacle about, like, should PMs be technical, but how do you feel that awareness of SQL and working in databases is relevant to product managers, and just awareness of how to process big data?
For what purpose? Why would I need to know how to do a SQL statement?
So understanding your customers and segmenting your customers, I think it's important to understand how to group your customers, how to define maturity. And I think
you mean how to pull data from your CRM?
So pulling data from your product database, usage-related data from the product database.
I think a lot of it depends on your resources and the size of your company and the effort that your company is putting on data. So if your company is large enough and has enough resources and cares enough about data, there's a good chance you're going to have a data team, or you're going to have analysts that you work with. Not to say that some product managers aren't incredible data analysts themselves, but I would be nowhere without the product analysts I work with. And like the BI team that we have. I think it depends. I mean, some PMs I know will go in and pull SQL queries, and I've had managers tell me that I needed to go learn that, and I found my time was better spent elsewhere. But not every company has the luxury of that, especially if you're at a really small startup. You may not have that. So I think it depends. I think you have to be able to read the data and understand and ask the right questions. No doubt, like you need to understand how to look at data or ask the right questions, but I don't necessarily think you need to be able to write a SQL query unless you want to start your own company and there's going to be 3 of you, then you should probably learn.
I would agree with that. I've traditionally always tried to have an analyst even within the PM team that could run and pull those reports, and I've had a lot of success, to be honest with you, with getting interns from local universities and things like that to help if I run into where I couldn't have a full time. But you need a strong analyst on the team to pull that. And I normally don't like to bog down the individual PMs with that type work because
So
their skills aren't going to be as strong.
I think the best thing about product managers being jack of all trades, which we have to be, is that we can do a lot of things, and we can jump in where it's needed, and we can fill gaps, and we can just make things happen. The bane of our existence also lies in the fact that we are jacks of all trades, because what we do when we're doing those things, when we're jumping in and doing SQL queries because we don't have a tool to do it or because we don't have a business analyst, is we're covering up a dysfunction in the organization. Mm-hmm. And we're using time that would be far better spent, to your point, out visiting customers, doing market research, finding out valuable problems to solve. Instead, we're writing SQL queries. And yeah, it's cool if you can do that. I can do it. I wouldn't sick that on anybody. But when I'm doing that, I'm covering up a dysfunction. And the more dysfunction we cover up, the less effective the next person is going to be. Mm-hmm. Dysfunction scales faster than function, I guess. I'm trying to think what's the antonym for dysfunction. Dysfunction will scale far faster than functional things that you're doing. And if you're constantly covering things up by doing it yourself, eventually you're going to wind up only doing those things that keep you within the four walls of your office. I've lived that so many times.
And if you get asked in an interview, can you write a SQL query? Can you go pull data? I would ask them if they have a data team and what they're thinking about with an analyst, because it's the same thing as if you get coding questions in a product interview. I would ask, what am I actually going to be doing here? Because if this isn't relevant to my job here, then it shouldn't be in the interview loop.
I would go further and say run. If you want to be a product manager and someone's asking if you can pull SQL queries or if you can code, that is not what you want to be. You're not being a product manager. And just, that's not the direction they should be asking you. How do you set strategy? How do you decide direction? How do you talk to clients? How do you sell? All these other type things you should be focused at. If you're spending your time in those other areas, you're not doing what you really should be focused on.
And I think that's the biggest problem in product management is all the other departments are defining it. Sales says, I need you to go on sales calls with me. Marketing says, we don't know what the products do, so could you give us some screenshots and some words? Development says, can you read aloud to us from Jira? The president says, God spoke to me in a dream. Can you write this shit down, right? And then you look at these job postings for these unicorn positions. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for somebody who's been in the industry for 75 years, and they're in their 20s, I have a friend who's a recruiter, and she says, we call these job posting purple squirrels. Mm-hmm. They don't exist in nature, right? We want somebody with domain, technical, they ought to be able to do SQL, they ought to be able to code, they ought to be able to talk to customers, they ought to be able to sell our product, they ought to be able to pick some other things, and will work for peanuts.
It's called being a founder, and being the only founder by yourself.
A product management job is fundamentally about running the business of the product. There are people to run the technical, there are people to run the promotion, there are people to do the selling. We need to make sure that what they're working on are the most important things.
Well, I think the purple squirrels are a perfect note to end on. So thank you to our debaters.